So this is number 3 in our Make the Most of It series. I'm going to start with a question. Do you have any friends? Think about that. One of my social studies teachers when I was in high school, I remember he was talking with us, with our class one day, and he said, I had a friend once. And of course, everyone laughed. I had a friend once. But he said, those of you that laugh, you may not have any idea what true friendship is all about. I had a friend once. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of friends or people that we call friends. There's a fair weather friend. It's only around when things are going well. There's a fickle friend who may be your friend one day and not your friend the other day. There's a user friend who's only around when he gets something out of you. And these are really not friends. We might call them acquaintances. But would it surprise you to know that the Bible actually has quite a bit to say about friendship? Make the most of your friendships. And that's what we're going to be reflecting on this morning. The Bible has quite a bit to say about friendship. I was thinking of Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 4 that says that a man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And if you can have a friend like that, truly you have found a true treasure. The scripture reading this morning reminded us that those people that can approach God are those who do no wrong. I think the translation that was read said neighbor. Some translations say those who do no wrong to their friend, and those who do not take up a reproach against those close to them. In other words, when you're good to your friends. It's precious to God if you're good to your friends. So we're going to be looking this morning at Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And we're going to reflect on the nature of friendship from this passage. And so let's go ahead and start reading from verse 7 of Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man, all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. We're reminded from verse 7 and verse 8 that it truly is not good for a person to be alone. God didn't create us to be loners, and as much as we are enamored with the loner, whether in movies or in our stories, that's not how God created us, and that's not the ideal situation. Sometimes I remember when I was growing up, I used to watch the Lone Ranger, but he really wasn't alone either, was he? He had his good friend with him. And so God created us for relationships. God created us for quality friendships because that is a reflection of the God that we serve. And so the question I want to reflect on this morning based on this passage is, what can I do to cultivate good, godly friendships? And the first point is be mutual. Friendship is not a one-way street. Friendship is a two-way street. If friendship is not a two-way street, then it's not really a true friendship. The passage says 2 have a good return for their labor. Okay? They both contribute to the relationship. There is mutual support in a friendship. And in contrast to that, I was thinking about a proverb that I'd read in Proverbs chapter 30, verse 15. It says that the leech has 2 daughters. You know what their names are? Give and give. That's kind of the nature of a leech, right? Always giving, never a giving spirit, but always give me. It's always taking and taking. Give and give. And the lesson in that, I think, is that there are some people in our lives that may be leeches, and I hope I'm not one of them. But you know what happens when everything dries up? What happens to a leech? They detach and they go someplace else. Maybe the lesson, though, a practical lesson, is if I want to have a friend, I need to be a friend, right? Okay, if I want to have a friend, I need to be a friend. I don't need to be a leech. I need to be a loyal friend. And I was thinking about this and remembering when Stacy and I were a young married couple. We lived in an apartment where we had our doors were all in the same breezeway with our neighbors. And we got real close to one of our neighbors, and we used to go out and we do everything together all the time. We go to concerts, we go to movies, we were in each other's houses for dinner all the time, and we'd go out to eat, and we were always bringing food over to their place and having dinner. And I didn't realize at the time, and I didn't mind it, but most of the time when we got together, came up with an idea, we wound up footing the bill for all of us. So that's cool, let's go ahead and do that. And I remember we ran into some difficulty. We weren't able to afford to do much of anything. And we got together. We would still bring the food over, and we couldn't even hardly afford to do that anymore. And we noticed that as time went on, they became less and less and less our friends. Matter of fact, that actually happened fairly quickly. And then it dawned on us what was going on. You know, as long as we were doing the giving, then they were there doing the taking. And I remember at one point, early in our relationship, they complained about how difficult it was to find good friends. And now I guess we weren't hanging out together anymore either. And I understood looking back on that. Part of if you want to have friends, you need to be a good friend, and it's a two-way street. It's not all about taking, but it's all about giving as well. To have a good friend, you need to be a good friend. And if I have trouble making friends, if I have trouble keeping friends, maybe this is part of my problem. A good friendship is a mutual friendship. We both contribute to it. The next point from this passage is simple. Be available. Be available. There's more warmth in friendship on a freezing day like today. There's more warmth in a friendship on a freezing day than in the summer all by yourself. The passage says 2 people can keep warm. How can a person keep warm all by himself? And you may be tempted, okay, it's cold here. I don't want to share any of my warmth. But what happens when you share your warmth with somebody else? You wind up getting more, don't you? And that's kind of the nature of friendship. When you share, you get more. Proverbs 17, verse 17 says that a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Friendship is precious to God, and it's beneficial. It's warm. Even Jesus teaches us about friendship. You know, in his final talk with his disciples, when he was in the upper room, he said, "I now call you my friends." He said, a master doesn't let his slave know everything that's going on, but I've told you all things because you are my friends. He was available. He literally was physically and emotionally available toward these guys that he called his friends. You know, they said at the very beginning in the gospel that his name will be what? Emmanuel, God with us. He was available. And if I'm going to be a good friend, I can't be a good friend unless I am available. Several years ago, there was a Christian brother that complained to me about his friends. He said something to the effect of, you know what, I have friends, but they're not here in the church. I'm more closer to some of the people that I work with than I am to people in the church, to my brethren. And he said it almost in an accusing sort of way. And I thought about what he said for a moment, and my question back to him was simply, what have you done to make friends of your brethren? What have you done? See, the problem is this was a person that was typically contentious. He had a short fuse. He was unapologetic, full of pride, and typically emotionally distant. And he always seemed like he was angry about something. And he was very secretive. He wasn't available physically or emotionally to other people. No wonder he had trouble making friends because he made very little effort making friends. Then I think of another woman that I knew that had a group of friends, and they belonged to a club that they formed They called it the Do Nothing Club. And I was asking, what is a Do Nothing Club? She said, well, we get together and we do nothing. And the whole point of that was we're good friends and we're just going to be together and be good friends. And after she talked about their Do Nothing Club, it occurred to me that they didn't do nothing. What they were doing was actually very significant. They did all different kinds of things, but the point was that they did it together. So it's kind of a misnomer. Maybe it should have been called a friendship club. Listen to some of these quotations of people that have figured it out. Someone once said, my closest relatives are my friends. Someone said, friendship is not a big thing. Friendship is not a big thing. It is a million little things. Someone once said, friendship is not about whom you have known the longest. It's about who came and never left. Someone said, true friendship comes when silence between two people becomes comfortable. Kind of becomes a language all of its own. You can just hang out and you don't have to say anything. And the warmth of friendship can only be present if I am available. Brings us to the third point. Be protective. A good friend is someone that always has your back. He looks out for you. He never leaves you. He's always there no matter what. And the text here uses a rope as an illustration. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. You take those 3 strands all by themselves, they have a limited amount of strength. But when you put them together and you twist them and bind them together, they draw strength from one another. What does this mean for friendship? As I reflected on this, I think it has to mean you have to be loyal as a friend. If you're twisted together, that means I am devoted to you and I am looking out for your best interest, and I'm not going to turn my back on you because you are my friend. Jesus said there's no greater love than for one to lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus' friends were actually willing to fight to the death for him, weren't they? But Jesus literally did just that. He laid down his life for his friends. I'm also reminded of a legendary friendship in the Bible. Some of you may have heard of King David before. You know who his best friend was? It's a young man by the name of Jonathan. And he actually took his life into his own hands against his father, who was trying to kill David in order to protect David. And their friendship was so strong that David said that it is the best thing that one could ever have, even better than the romantic love that he'd had with a woman. And there's nothing better than a strong, loyal friendship. As a friend, you also need to be trustworthy. The proverb says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Now, I know there are some people that think that a friend, a true friend, is someone who supports you no matter what. Whatever you decide to do, I'm going to support that because I am your friend. But that's not what this proverb says. Sometimes your friend tells you what you need to hear, and it may not be pleasant. And sometimes it may sting, sometimes it may hurt. But it says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. I'm doing this because I care about you. I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this because I have your best interests at heart. Deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. I'll tell you what you need to hear, even if it winds up leading to your demise. And a true friend is honest. That's what we were just talking about. A true friend is considerate. I thought of this passage. He who blesses his friend in the morning with a loud voice, to him it will be considered a curse. Some of us are not morning people, right? I've never been a morning person. My wife used to be a morning person. She used to bounce out of bed and get me up out of bed. But it says if you wind up blessing with a loud voice, then it's going to be considered a curse. In other words, a true friend is someone that is considerate. Being a good friend means that you're loyal, you're trustworthy, you're honest, you're considerate, and you have your friend's back. All right, one more point. I didn't quite know how to put this. There's a couple other things that aren't mentioned in the text that I think it's important to deal with. So I just kind of put it under the heading of be wise. Be wise. A couple of final points. We need to recognize that there are limits to biblical friendship. You know, in Deuteronomy it says, if a friend secretly entices you to go after other gods, don't listen. Do away with them. In the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 15:33, it says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. And that's a reminder that we need to choose our friends wisely. But at the same time, it doesn't mean to cut yourself off from all people. And I want to focus on this passage. Turn to Luke chapter 16 with me, if you would. Luke chapter 16. A lot of people have puzzled over this parable because it seems like such an unusual thing. Let's go ahead and read it. Chapter 16, verse 1. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. And then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he said. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. So then, when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. I understand why this is a very puzzling passage. I think if I was going to use an example, I might use some other kind of example. But I believe what Jesus is doing here is contrasting the children of light with someone like this dishonest manager. A little translational thing here. Verse 9, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, my NIV says, you will be welcomed. But literally it says, so that they will welcome you into eternal dwellings. Who are the they? Talking about the people that you've made friends with. You see what Jesus is saying? He said, this worldly, dishonest manager shrewdly used money in order to gain friends so that they would welcome him into their homes when he lost his job. The contrast is he challenges children of light to use their wealth to make friends, not in a dishonest way, but in a way to make friends so that, well, how are they going to welcome me into eternal dwellings? If they also accept Christ and they become Christians, and they go on ahead of me, then they can welcome me into eternal dwellings. In other words, invest in friendship is what Jesus is saying here for the benefit of your friends. Invest in friendship. And as I think about this, I realize I think I was a little bit better at this when I was younger than I am now. I was real good at it when I was a teenager. It seemed like there was a group of us that were always running around doing stuff together. We used to run up the Top Dog. Anyone remember Top Dog? It's not there. I don't know if there's any sign that was ever there. But we always used to run the Top Dog, and we'd play video games, and they had a racetrack, and we'd go around, and we'd do that all the time. Or we'd run up to South Roads when it was still a mall, and we'd hang out there and go and hang out there. Or South Cinema 4. Anyone remember that? We used to go, and we'd do all these things together, and there was a group of us, and we're always inviting other people. And oftentimes we'd invite someone, I don't have the money to go. And so we'd all pull out our money. We'd pull our money together and said, yeah, we got enough. We can cover all of us and take off. That's the sort of thing I think Jesus is talking about. Use what you have in order to make friends, in order to introduce them to yourselves, to your friends, and to other Christians, so that when the time comes, hopefully, when they leave this life, they can go on ahead of you and welcome you home in heaven, so that they can become a Christian just like you are. So we should always be inviting people to join into our lives as well and invest in friendship. Make new friends. Invite them bowling. Invite them on picnics, on outings. Nothing is better than an unbelieving acquaintance becoming a brother in Christ. Oh, that's just scratching the surface. God does have a lot to say about friendship. The final question I want to ask is, who are your friends? And probably even more significantly, is Jesus your friend? Think about the cost Jesus paid in order to bring ourselves to Him. He died on the cross, was buried, rose up from the grave, so that we can spend eternity in heaven with Him. What He wants us to do is accept His offer by devoting our lives completely to Him, being buried with Him, and raised up as a new person. We're going to go ahead and sing a song this morning, and I want you to reflect on these things as Grayson makes his way up here to sing the invitation song.